This video is brought to you by Midway USA. Support the channel by choosing Midway for your shooting and outdoor supplies. Welcome to 9-Hole Reviews. In today's video, we return to the world of low-power variable optics, or LPVOs, to take a look at a newer option that frankly came out of nowhere with some of the best on-paper stats of any LPVO on the market. This is the Primary Arms PLX-C, and we're going to see if the ridiculous spec sheet translates to actual real use and performance. Now, I feel like we need to hammer home one key point. When it comes to LPVOs, we've yet to find an optic that doesn't have some sort of trade-off. If an optic excels in one area, it generally sacrifices in another. There's no free lunch, as the adage goes. So as we eval this optic, our real goal is to find out where the heck the trade-off on the PLXC is, especially with the adjustments it made from the original PLX. Speaking of the OG PLX, don't get it mistaken. The original and the new PLX are about as similar in their attributes as oil and water. So, if you have any preconceived notions based on your experience with the original optic, you can set them aside now. So as we begin our review, we need to start with the weight and profile, since this optic maximizes the stats in this category. Normally, LPVOs sit between 21 to 28 ounces. This optic clocks in at under 17 ounces. If you stack up any top LPVO on the market right now, I'd be confident in saying it's going to weigh in more than the PLXC. Even the ultralight, ultra-minimalist NX8 weighs in heavier at 17.6 ounces. Why we need to hit on this straight away is that most minimalist optics are generally trading off a lot of their performance capability to hit this weight point. And so, is that the case with the PLXC? Let's dive in and talk about clarity. Yes, it's excellent, as you'd expect at a Japanese-made glass. There's strong light transmission as well. The image is quite vibrant. The clarity is very good, but up at maximum magnification, the edges of the optic can get a hint of fuzz to them, especially if your head is not perfectly aligned behind the optic. More on that in a minute. The camera makes this appear about 50 times worse than it is in person, so take what you're seeing with a big grain of salt, but in terms of trade-off against that ultra-light footprint, there is a touch of that taking place here. Next, we need to consider how easy it is to get behind the optic, and let's center the conversation on the eye box at 1 power first. There's a good deal of forgiveness that's afforded to the shooter here. As long as your head is on the stock, you'll be able to see through the optic. We'd put it up against any of the other mainstay LPVOs in this space. I'd call this aligned with the Razors from Vortex and even something on the top premium end of the spectrum like the Nightforce Attacker. The 1 power eye box is an immediate win for the PLXC. Now up at max power, Henry and I both agree that the eye box and eye relief get materially more specific. You need to be really well aligned at 8 power. And it's noticeably tighter than something like the Nightforce Attacker or the OG PLX at maximum magnification. With that said, if you don't max out the optic and you stop at around 5 to 6 power, the eye box is aligned with the Attacker at those power levels. It's almost as if the eye box doesn't tighten consistently as you raise the magnification. So at 5 to 6 power, it still feels decent. But then from 6 to 8 power, it gets materially tighter. This is similar to the Vortex Razor Gen 3 as well, where the 8 to 10 power range is materially tighter than if you were to stop the magnification at, say, 6 to 8 power on that optic. So because of this, you need to be very sure when you mount up this optic to check and ensure that your eye relief and eye box are good at the top power magnification. We mentioned earlier with respect to clarity that up at max magnification, there can be a touch of fuzz near the edges. In our estimation, this is the spot where the trade-off takes place in terms of the ultra lightweight package and the performance. To balance out this conversation, since I use the ATACR as a comparative example, know that the eye box at 8 power on the PLX-C crushes the eye box of the Nightforce NX8 at 8 power. So while it sits in the weight class of the NX8, that being super lightweight and minimalist in footprint, it's hitting materially better performance in this category. Next, we get to field of view, and if you thought that this would be the area where the PLX-C slips, you'd be wrong. The field of view on 1 power for this optic is 121 feet. 121 feet. That's 12.5% better than the ATACR, and 4 to 5% better than the Vortex Razor Gen 3 and Gen 2 respectively. This is pretty sick, especially when you include the fact that the bezel on the rear objective is very thin. This is one of the best 1 power field of views on the market. Now, what about higher power? 14.5 feet at 8 power. It's noticeably tight, but how does it stack up? Well, this is less than 1 foot worse than the Razor Gen 2, but at 2 times greater magnification. And compared to the ATACR, we're looking at almost 10% better field of view at 8 power. Again, these are some pretty sick stats for an optic that puts so much emphasis on the minimalist footprint. So let's take a look at the reticle next. The PLXC comes currently in 3 reticle options: the M8 yards, the M8 meters, and the M8 Griffin. The reticle you're looking at is the M8 meters. Between the yards and meter variants, we prefer meters as it's a bit cleaner than the yards as far as we're concerned. So let's talk about 1 power first. Holy cow, what a major improvement over the original PLX. The addition of the Stadia make this optic massively more effective at the 50 and in ranges. A huge improvement. Additionally, the image sits particularly flat at 1 power. There isn't any fishbowling or anything of the sort. And so what about as we extend out on range? How does the reticle work out? Well, this is a first focal plane reticle, so the stadia disappear and the BDC grid comes into focus. And the BDC grid, is it accurate? Yup, it sure is. You should look at your own ballistic calculators to confirm, but shooting IMI Razor Core 77s, we were perfectly aligned, as in dead center impacts as we extended the ranges out and beyond 400, coming out of our 16-inch SCAR 16. As with most of the ACSS reticles, you also gain the advantage of win holds, target ranging by shoulder height, and by overall target height. So the reticle improves the close range capability of its predecessor while maintaining the distance capability. Now on to the turrets, which come capped. I'd say that's perfect for an optic like this, but there are also exposed adjustable turrets included in the shipment. That's pretty rad. It's a great value add and provides options. In terms of the power adjustment, another huge win here for the PLXC. Not only is it an improvement over the OG PLX with the inclusion of the throw lever, but it's dramatically easier to manipulate than both the ATACR and the Razor Gen 2. It's not quite as nimble as the NX8, but it's closer to that than the other 2 aforementioned optics. Now let's talk illumination. The illumination is very similar to others in the PA lineup, which, to quote Superset CA, is daylight red, not daylight bright, and we can confirm. The illumination is very bright in dark areas when turned up to max, but isn't bright enough to shine through a modern white light being activated, and it's not really relevant in daylight. So keep that in mind. For me, I normally shoot optics dark anyway under most circumstances, so I'm not bothered by this, and the inclusion of the Stadia lines ensure that your 1 power speed is going to be there regardless. But if you're looking for a daylight bright burning red dot in the center of your LPVO, you're going to be disappointed here. in terms of the controls across the board. Turret clicks in 0.1 mil increments, illumination adjustments, and power adjustment are all tactile with knurled knobs and have very solid overall feeling controls. So long and short, this $1,500 optic is basically batting in alignment with most other top quality S-tier LPVOs on the market in terms of general capable categories, save absolute top-end magnification. So now the question really becomes, is the trade-off worth it for you? Henry and I have talked about this at length. The PLXC, in our opinion, is what the Nightforce NX8 was trying to be. Minimalist, lightweight, extremely usable at 1 power, and easily usable on mid powers out to, say, 500 or so, with the option to crank up to 8 power to extend the engagement range to 600 plus. This is the peak performance package in our estimation for a 14.5 to 16-inch gun where weight matters. So maybe not a 3-gun setup, but if you're looking at having to carry something around, perhaps as a recce setup, this is probably the ticket. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and until next time, we'll see you on the range.
716, this is Steel 96, 4 Vic, 8 packs, red con 1, green to green. How copy, over?
Steel 96, this is 716, roger, over. 16, Steel 91, 1 pack,